The first time Gunnery Sergeant Ray Calloway noticed the Tesla in his driveway, he didn't say a word. He just stood on his front porch in his slippers, coffee in hand, watching the brake lights glow red against his garage door at 6:47 in the morning. By the 38th time, the Tesla wasn't in his driveway anymore. It wasn't anywhere. And the man who owned it, a 32-year-old tech executive named Brendan Whitfield Ashton III, was standing barefoot on the asphalt of Magnolia Court in Cedar Park, Texas, watching three black Suburbans pull up to the curb. This is the story of a quiet Marine, a loud neighbor, and a $1.2 million reminder that some men don't shout when they're angry. They just take notes. Let me tell you about Magnolia Court. It's a cul-de-sac of 9 houses tucked into the hills just outside Austin, in a town called Cedar Park, Texas. The kind of street where the live oaks lean over the asphalt like old friends sharing a secret, where the sound of sprinklers ticking on at sunrise is louder than any traffic, where every single house flies an American flag, and every single mailbox is painted the same shade of cream the HOA approved back in 1998. In the summer of 2022, you could walk down Magnolia Court at dawn and smell 3 things in this exact order: coffee from the Petersons' kitchen window, fresh-cut St. Augustine grass from the corner lot, and the faint, sweet smoke from Mr. Calloway's smoker out back, where he'd been slow-cooking a brisket since 4 in the morning. It was the kind of neighborhood people moved to when they were tired of cities, tired of noise, tired of strangers who didn't say good morning. Ray Calloway had lived at 1407 Magnolia Court for 19 years. And in 19 years, he had never once raised his voice on that street. That was about to change. Well, sort of. Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Lee Calloway, United States Marine Corps, retired, born in Beaumont, Texas, 1965, enlisted at 17 with his mother's signature on the dotted line. He served from 1983 to 2009, 26 years. He did 2 tours in Beirut in his early days, then Desert Storm in 91, then Mogadishu in 93, it's the bad one, the one they made the movie about, then 2 more tours in Iraq after the towers came down and changed everything. He came home with 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star with a Combat V, and a left knee that clicked every time he stood up from his recliner. But here's what most folks on Magnolia Court didn't know about Ray. For the last 12 years of his career, Ray wasn't kicking down doors anymore. He was in the Marine Corps Criminal Investigation Division, CID. He spent those 12 years building cases, interviewing witnesses, reviewing wire transfers, putting Marines, contractors, and a few foreign nationals in federal prison for things like fraud, theft, and embezzlement of military property. Ray Calloway was, by trade, a man who built airtight cases against people who underestimated him. These days, at 57 years old, he lived alone in a single-story brick ranch with a pecan tree in the front yard and a workshop in the back. His wife, Marlene, had passed in 2019 after a long fight with ovarian cancer. They'd never had children, just a black Labrador named Tank who slept at the foot of his bed and followed him everywhere. Ray's days had a rhythm: coffee at 5:30, walk Tank around the cul-de-sac at 6:00, read the paper, work in the shop on whatever cradle, jewelry box, or rocking chair he was building for one of the neighborhood kids' birthdays, smoke a brisket on Sundays for whichever family on the block had a reason to celebrate. He was the man you called when your car battery died, the man who fixed the Robertsons' fence after the tornado warning came through and dropped half an oak on it, the man who stood at the back of the church at every neighborhood funeral and quietly, without being asked, organized the meal train. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people leaned in. You see, folks, that's the thing about men like Ray Calloway. They don't take up space. They occupy it. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday in March of 2022. It was 81 degrees, the bluebonnets were just starting to come up along the highway's shoulders, and the house at 1409 Magnolia Court, right next door to Ray's, had been sitting empty for 6 weeks since old Mr. Hennessy passed away in his sleep. The new owner pulled up behind the truck in a brand new pearl white 2023 Tesla Model X Plaid, falcon wing doors, custom red leather interior, license plate that read, Win Now 3. He stepped out wearing a $400 hoodie that said Founder across the chest, AirPods in both ears, and a Patagonia vest the color of money. Brendan Whitfield Ashton III, 32 years old, CEO of a crypto startup called Lumen Chain Holdings, valued, at least on paper, at $140 million. He had moved to Cedar Park from San Francisco because, in his own words, to anyone who would listen, Texas had no state income tax and no woke mind virus. His wife, Tatum, was 26. She drove a matching Tesla, pearl white, smaller, also leased. They had no children. They had 2 French bulldogs named Bezos and Buffett. That first afternoon, while Ray was outside watering the rose bushes Marlene had planted along the property line years ago, pink ones, her favorite, Brendan walked over. He didn't introduce himself, he didn't extend a hand. He just looked at the rose bushes, then at the house, then at Ray's faded Marine Corps cap and said, "Hey Chief, those bushes are like half on my side. Can you take care of that this week?" Ray stood up slowly, wiped the dirt off his hands on the front of his jeans, looked at the rose bushes, which were, in fact, exactly 2.5 feet onto Ray's side of the property line where they had been since 2006. He smiled politely. "Welcome to the neighborhood." Then he turned around, went inside, and made a single note in a small leather notebook he kept in the kitchen drawer. The notebook was a habit from his CID days. He hadn't used it in 14 years. He would fill it up before the year was out. 3 weeks later, on the morning of April 14, 2022, Ray walked outside at 6:45 a.m. to take Tank for his morning walk and found a pearl-white Tesla Model X parked across his driveway. Not next to it, not partially in front of it. Across it diagonally, like the driver had aimed for it. Ray stood on his porch for a long moment, coffee mug in one hand, leash in the other. Tank looked up at him, confused. He didn't curse, he didn't bang on the neighbor's door. He just took out his phone and snapped 3 photographs, one wide, one of the rear license plate, and one with his own mailbox in the frame so the location was clear. Then he walked Tank around the cul-de-sac the long way. When he got back, the Tesla was gone. He went inside, opened the leather notebook, and wrote, April 14, 2022, 6:45 hours. Subject vehicle TX plate win now 3 blocking driveway. Photos taken, duration unknown. Then he put on his good cap, the one with the gold stitching, and walked next door. He knocked 3 times, polite, even. Brendan answered in athletic shorts and that same hoodie, AirPods still in, holding a green smoothie in a mason jar. "Yeah." Ray took off his cap, held it in front of him. "Morning, Mr. Ashton. I'm Ray Calloway from next door. Wanted to let you know your Tesla was parked across my driveway this morning. I know you're new to the street. Just wanted to introduce myself and ask if we could work out a different spot for visitors and deliveries going forward." Brendan stared at him, took out one AirPod, took a long sip of his smoothie. "Bro, it's a public street." "Yes, sir, but the access to my driveway is." "Look, old-timer," Brendan smiled like he was talking to a child. "This isn't your little army base anymore, okay? You don't get to tell people where to park." Ray's jaw tightened just a fraction. Most men wouldn't have noticed. Marine's son, not army. Whatever. The door closed. Ray stood on the porch for 10 seconds. Then he walked back home, opened the notebook, and added one line beneath the first entry. Verbal request to cease made in person. Refused, hostile. Direct hit now. Let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever, and I mean ever, tried to be reasonable with a person who has absolutely no interest in being reasonable? Tried to do the polite thing, the neighborly thing, the grown-up thing, and been mocked for it? If you have, drop a comment below and tell me about it, because Ray Calloway was about to find out something a lot of us already know. Sometimes the calm route doesn't work. Sometimes you have to take the receipts. The next morning, the Tesla was there again. In the morning after that. By the end of April, Ray had 7 entries in his notebook. By the end of May, he had 19. By the second week of June, the count was 26. He documented each one the same way: date, time, photo, plate visible, his own mailbox in the frame for context, sometimes Tank's tail in the corner just for good measure. He filed 3 formal complaints with the Cedar Park HOA. The board sent 2 warning letters to 1409 Magnolia Court. Both were ignored. He filed 2 reports with the Cedar Park Police non-emergency line. Both times an officer came out, knocked on Brendan's door, and Brendan moved the Tesla with a smirk, only to put it right back the next morning. In late June, the favor got returned. A Cedar Park PD cruiser pulled into Ray's driveway at 9:48 on a Saturday night. The officer, a young man named Officer Daly who couldn't have been more than 25, stepped out apologetically. "Mr. Calloway, we received a call about a domestic disturbance at this address. Loud yelling, a woman screaming, possible firearm." Ray looked at him, then looked past him at Brendan's front window, where the curtain twitched once. "Officer," Ray said, "I live alone with my dog. Tank's been asleep on the recliner for the last 2 hours. The TV is off. You're welcome to come in and see for yourself." Officer Daly stepped inside. Tank thumped his tail once, didn't even open his eyes. The officer apologized again, filled out his form, logged the call as unfounded. Ray walked him back to the cruiser, shook his hand, and thanked him for his service. Then he went back inside and added 1 more entry to the notebook. June 25, 2022, Cedar Park PD response: false report of domestic disturbance firearm. Source unconfirmed but suspected. Officer Daly, badge 2247. It was the false police call that crossed something internal in Ray. Not because of the embarrassment, because of what could have happened. Because somewhere in the back of his head, in the part of him that had spent 26 years in uniform, he knew what an officer with adrenaline and bad information can do at a stranger's front door at 9:48 on a Saturday night. But the parking was just the appetizer. In late May, Ray came home from the H-E-B grocery store to find his garbage cans tipped over and 3 contractor bags from Brendan's house, full of Amazon boxes and protein bar wrappers, dumped in his front yard. The wind was blowing 18 miles an hour out of the south. The trash was already drifting down the cul-de-sac. Ray cleaned it up, photographed it, logged it. In early June, his mailbox, the cream-colored one Marlene had picked out 12 years ago, was knocked clean off its post. Tire tracks on his front lawn, pearl-white paint scrape on the wood post. He photographed it, logged it, filed a police report. Brendan denied it, said it must have been some teenagers. Ray rebuilt the post himself the next weekend. Cedar, hand-sanded, finished with 3 coats of marine spar varnish because that's how he did things. A week after the mailbox, Tank came home from his morning walk limping. Ray sat on the front step and gently held the dog's right paw in his lap. There was a clean, deep cut just above the pad. A piece of green glass, the color of a Heineken bottle, was still embedded in it. Ray pulled the glass out with a pair of jeweler's tweezers, cleaned the wound with peroxide, wrapped it in gauze, drove Tank to the vet in Round Rock where Dr. Fielding gave the dog a tetanus shot and 4 stitches and charged Ray $362. Then Ray drove home and pulled the camera footage from the night before. At 1:14 in the morning, the cameras showed someone walking down the sidewalk in front of Ray's house, scattering broken glass across the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the curb, the exact strip where Ray walked Tank every morning at 6. The figure on the footage was wearing a hoodie, but the figure was also wearing flip-flops, pearl-white flip-flops with a small Tesla logo on the heel. Ray paused the footage, zoomed in, took a screenshot. He didn't say a word. He went out the next morning at 5:30 with a leaf blower, a dustpan, and a flashlight, and he cleaned up every single piece of glass before any of the other neighborhood dogs could get to it. Then in mid-June came the moment that turned a feud into a case. Ray came outside one Saturday morning to find Marlene's rose bushes, her pink rose bushes sprayed with herbicide. The leaves were curled and brown, the buds were blackening, the whole row was dying from the roots up. He stood there for a long time. Tank sat at his feet, whining quietly. Then he walked to the side of his house where he'd installed 4K security cameras the previous fall, a habit from his CID days, and pulled the footage. There, in crystal clear high definition at 11:47 p.m. the night before, was Brendan Whitfield Ashton III in flip-flops and a bathrobe, walking along the property line with a black plastic sprayer, soaking the base of every single rose bush. Ray watched the footage 3 times. Then he saved it, backed it up to a thumb drive, backed it up to the cloud, made a copy on a second thumb drive that he sealed in a manila envelope and put in his safe deposit box at First Texas Bank the following Monday. He did not call the police. He did not knock on Brendan's door. He did not say one word. He simply opened the leather notebook and wrote, in his careful, blocky handwriting, June 18, 2022, Marlene's Roses, confirmed perpetrator on video, saved. And underneath, smaller, almost like a private note to himself. That's the line. But the line had not yet been crossed, not for Ray. Because here's the thing about a man trained to build cases, he doesn't strike first, he waits for the case to build itself. So Ray kept counting, kept photographing, kept logging. By the end of July, the Tesla had been parked across his driveway 31 times, 31 verifiable, photographed, time-stamped incidents. In August, 2 more, then 4 more. By September 8, 2022, a humid Thursday morning, the kind where the cicadas were already screaming by sunrise, the count was 37. That morning, Ray walked outside in his slippers to take Tank for his walk. The pearl-white Tesla was parked once again across his driveway, number 38. But this time, something else was wrong. Tank was already outside. He'd nosed open the screen door, a trick the old lab had figured out years ago. He was standing in the middle of the cul-de-sac, looking down the street. His tail was not wagging. Ray followed his gaze. Lying in front of Brendan's mailbox, perfectly arranged, was Marlene's wedding portrait. It had been on Ray's living room mantel. In a silver frame she had picked out herself the week before their wedding in 1989. The frame was now in 5 pieces on Brendan's lawn. The portrait, Marlene at 24 in white lace, smiling like she was looking at the only man in the world, was face down on the wet grass. The glass was shattered into the photograph itself. Ray walked slowly across the cul-de-sac. He knelt down. He picked up the portrait the way a man picks up his sleeping child, carefully with both hands. He turned it over, pulled a piece of glass out of Marlene's smile. He looked up at the front window of 1409 Magnolia Court. Brendan was standing there in his hoodie, watching, holding his phone, filming. He waved. Ray did not wave back. He stood up, walked home, closed his front door. Direct hit, and here's where the story turns, folks. Because if you think Ray Calloway is going to scream or call the cops or grab a baseball bat, you have not been listening. If you think he's going to do anything visible at all, you've never met a Marine like Ray Calloway. He sat down at his kitchen table. He put Marlene's portrait on a clean dish towel. He poured himself a fresh cup of coffee, and he sat there for a full 11 minutes just breathing. Then he picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. A number that belonged to a man named Daniel Reyes. Special Agent Daniel Reyes, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Task Force, Houston Field Office. Ray's spotter from his second tour in Iraq. The man whose life Ray had saved in Fallujah in November of 2004. The phone rang twice. Gunny, that you? Ray took a slow sip of coffee. Danny, he said, I need a favor. Now here's what nobody on Magnolia Court knew. Not Brendan's, not Totem, not the HOA board, not even the Petersons next door who had known Ray for 19 years and considered him family. Ray Calloway hadn't just been a Marine. For the last 12 years of his career, Gunnery Sergeant Calloway had been a senior investigator with Marine Corps CID, assigned on multiple joint task forces with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. He had worked elbow to elbow with civilian agents on cases involving stolen military property being laundered through shell corporations and offshore crypto wallets. He had testified in 11 federal trials. He had a conviction rate on the cases he built of 100%. When Ray retired in 2009, he didn't go into private security like most of his peers. He took the LSAT, scored a 168, and finished a paralegal certification at the University of Texas at Austin. For 10 years after that, he worked part-time, quietly, from his home office on Magnolia Court, as a contract paralegal for a firm in Austin that specialized in white-collar federal defense. He knew, in a way most people never will, exactly how a federal asset forfeiture case is built. And here's what nobody on Magnolia Court knew about Brendan Whitfield Ashton III. Lumen Chain Holdings, his $140 million crypto startup, was being looked at, quietly, patiently, by the same FBI Financial Crimes Task Force in Houston where Daniel Reyes was now a special agent in charge. Lumen Chain had raised $47 million from retail investors over the previous 18 months. The company had never produced a working product. Brendan had used investor funds to lease 2 Teslas, a $9 million home in Cedar Park, a vacation property in Cabo San Lucas, and to pay himself a personal consulting fee of $2.3 million in the previous quarter alone. The Bureau had been building the case for 14 months. They were waiting on one more witness statement and one more subpoena before moving. When Daniel Reyes heard the address Ray gave him, 1409 Magnolia Court, Cedar Park, Texas, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Gunny, you're telling me Brendan Ashton lives next door to you?" "Yes, sir." "And he's been doing what?" Ray told him calmly, methodically. 38 blocked driveway incidents, the trash, the mailbox, the roses, the wedding portrait, all documented, all photographed, all time-stamped, all backed up in 3 places, including a safe deposit box. He told him about the 4K cameras. He told him about the leather notebook. Daniel Reyes laughed just once, a low, quiet laugh. "Gunny," he said, "I think we just got our last witness." There was a pause on the line. "And one more thing," Daniel said. "Don't do anything for a couple weeks. Just sit tight, live your life, walk tank, smoke your briskets. Let us handle the rest." Ray smiled just a little. "Roger that." He hung up, walked over to the kitchen window, looked out across the rose bushes, what was left of them, at the back of Brendan's pearl-white Tesla, still parked across his driveway. And for the first time in months, Ray Calloway felt, deep in his chest, the slow and patient stillness he used to feel right before a raid in Fallujah. The stillness of a man who already knows how the morning ends. Direct hit. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever known something the other person didn't? Watched somebody dig their own hole, shovel after shovel, while you just sipped your coffee and waited? If you have, you know exactly the look that was on Ray Calloway's face that morning. Because the hammer wasn't coming down in a week. It was coming down in 11 days. Tuesday, September 20th, 2022, 6:42 a.m. It was a cool morning in Cedar Park, 63 degrees, a light fog still hugging the live oaks at the end of the cul-de-sac, the first hint of fall in the air for the first time all year. Ray was on his porch with Tank and his coffee in his old Marine Corps sweatshirt, watching the eastern sky go pink over the rooftops. The pearl-white Tesla was, of course, parked across his driveway. Number 39. At 6:43, Ray heard the sound he'd been waiting 11 days to hear. Tires, lots of them, coming up the hill. 3 black Chevy Suburbans turned onto Magnolia Court. Behind them, 2 Cedar Park police cruisers. Behind them, an unmarked Ford with U.S. Marshals plates. Behind that, a flatbed tow truck from Reyes & Sons Towing, a company owned, as it happened, by Ray's late wife's brother, Hector Reyes, no relation to Daniel, operating that morning under a federal asset seizure contract. And bringing up the rear, almost gently, a single white news van from KXAN Austin. The convoy stopped in front of 1409 Magnolia Court. 12 federal agents in raid jackets, 3 FBI, 2 SEC, 2 IRS criminal investigation, 3 U.S. Marshals, 2 Cedar Park PD, got out and walked in formation to Brendan's front door. Brendan opened it in his bathrobe, holding a green smoothie in a mason jar. Tatum behind him in pajamas, both French bulldogs at her feet. The lead agent, a woman named Special Agent Marisol Vega, held up a folder thick as a phone book. Brendan Whitfield Ashton III. Yes. We have a federal warrant for your arrest on 23 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. We also have a court order for the immediate seizure of the following assets pending trial. She started to read the list. Both Teslas, the house, the Cabo property, 3 bank accounts, 2 crypto wallets. Brendan dropped his smoothie. It splattered green across the front step. Tatum started to cry. The bulldogs, oblivious, ran out into the yard. Behind Brendan, agents began carrying out boxes of files, hard drives, 3 laptops, and a small safe. The flatbed tow truck pulled up to the Tesla, number 39, still blocking Ray's driveway, and within 4 minutes that pearl-white Model X Plaid was strapped down and headed for a federal impound lot in San Antonio. Tatum's smaller Tesla was hooked next. Inside the house, the agents kept moving, methodical, quiet, boxes labeled in black marker. The Sub-Zero refrigerator opened, photographed, closed. The home office stripped of every monitor and hard drive. The framed Stanford diploma on the wall lifted down and tagged. The coffee table books, heavy art books with names like Disrupting the Future and Founder Mindset, flipped open one at a time to check for hidden flash drives. Outside, 2 SEC investigators were on the front lawn, photographing the Tesla's vanity license plate. Win now 3. One of them said something to the other and they both laughed just once and shook their heads. The neighbors started coming out onto their porches. The Petersons, the Robertsons, old Mrs. Lynn from the corner. They stood in their robes and slippers, watching, silent, hands over their mouths. Brendan, in handcuffs by then, turned his head and saw Ray standing on his porch next door. Ray was sipping his coffee. He gave a single, slow nod. Brendan opened his mouth to say something. The agent's hand on his head guided him into the back of the Suburban. The door closed. Direct hit now. I want to pause here, folks, because I want you to picture this. Picture a 32-year-old man who, 6 months earlier, had walked up to a Marine veteran in his own front yard and called him old-timer. Picture him in a bathrobe, in handcuffs, watching his Tesla roll away on the back of a flatbed truck, watching his wife sob on the front step of a house that no longer belonged to them. And picture the man next door in his slippers just drinking his coffee, not smiling, not gloating, just watching the morning happen the way he had known it would happen. The civil suit Ray filed 3 weeks later for harassment, destruction of property, and intentional infliction of emotional distress related to Marlene's portrait was settled out of bankruptcy court for $1,200,000. Plus legal fees. Every penny of Ray's portion went into a foundation he established in Marlene's name, the Marlene Calloway Memorial Fund for Children of Fallen Marines. It still gives out 4 scholarships a year. The street went quiet. For the first time in 6 months, Magnolia Court woke up the next morning without a pearl-white Tesla blocking anything. Tatum stayed in the house for 11 more days while the federal trustees inventoried the property. The Patagonia vests, the AirPods, the Peloton, the Sub-Zero refrigerator full of cold-pressed juices, all of it tagged and listed and removed. She didn't speak to anyone on the street. She just walked the bulldogs in the early morning, hood up, eyes down. When the moving truck finally came on October 1st, it was a single 12-foot rental U-Haul. She loaded it herself with the help of her sister who had driven in from Plano. The neighbors watched from their porches. Nobody waved. Nobody said goodbye. Old Mrs. Lynn walked out with a peach pie wrapped in foil and gave it to Tatum, because that was the kind of woman Mrs. Lynn was. Tatum cried into Mrs. Lynn's shoulder for about 90 seconds, then climbed into the U-Haul and drove away. Mrs. Lynn walked back across the cul-de-sac with the empty pie pan in her hands. She stopped at Ray's mailbox. She didn't go up to the door. She just stood there for a moment, looked at the rebuilt cedar post, looked at the bare patches where the rose bushes used to be, and shook her head once. Then she went home and made another pie. Apple. She left it on Ray's porch that evening with a small note that said only, "Thank you, Ray," the whole street. The house at 1409 Magnolia Court sat empty for 4 months. Brendan Whitfield Ashton III was indicted on all 23 counts. He took a plea deal in March of 2023 to avoid trial. He was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison at FCI Bastrop, just 32 miles down the highway from Magnolia Court. Tatum filed for divorce in April. The Bulldogs went with her. Lumen Chain Holdings was dissolved by court order. $47 million was returned in pennies on the dollar to the retail investors who had trusted Brendan's pitch deck. In the pearl-white Tesla Model X Plaid. It was auctioned by the U.S. Marshals Service in February of 2023 for $89,400. The proceeds went to the victims' restitution fund. It vanished from Magnolia Court. It never came back. 3 years have passed now. It's the spring of 2025. The house at 1409 Magnolia Court has new owners, a young couple named Jake and Hannah Bell. He's an Air Force veteran, flew C-17s out of Charleston before retiring as a major. She's a kindergarten teacher at Cedar Park Elementary. They have a 4-year-old son named Eli who calls Ray Mr. Coffee Man because every morning at 6:30, Eli toddles across the lawn in his dinosaur pajamas to sit on Ray's porch and share half a banana with Tank. The Bells brought Ray an apple pie the day they moved in. Ray brought them a cradle he'd built in his shop for Eli's baby sister, who was due in July. Marlene's rose bushes, well, they didn't all come back, but 4 of them did. Pink, stubborn, right along the property line where she'd planted them in 2003. Ray waters them every morning before his coffee. He has a new project in the workshop these days. He's building a chest of drawers for the Bell's baby. Walnut, hand-dovetailed, with a small carved oak leaf in the corner of every drawer, Marlene's signature. Daniel Ray's calls every couple of months. They talk about the old days, about the bureau, about the new Marines coming up. Tank is 12 now, his muzzle is gray. He still nudges open the screen door every morning. And once a year on September 20th, Ray walks down to the end of the driveway with his coffee, looks at the spot where the pearl-white Tesla used to sit, and smiles just a little. Then he goes back inside and starts his day. The leather notebook is back in the kitchen drawer, closed, quiet, full of dates and license plates and timestamps that nobody on Magnolia Court will ever need to read again. But Ray keeps it, right next to the silver pen Marlene gave him for their 20th anniversary in 2009. Just in case. Because that's the thing about a man who knows how to build a case. He never throws the notebook away. You see, folks, there's a lesson in this story, and it's older than any of us. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man. Never mistake patience for permission. Never look at a 57-year-old in slippers, drinking his coffee, watering his late wife's rose bushes, and assume you're looking at someone you can push around. Because you don't know what that man has seen. You don't know what he's survived. You don't know what's in his leather notebook, or in his safe deposit box, or in the phone numbers he hasn't called in 20 years. And you sure don't know what he's capable of when you cross the one line that matters. Brendan Ashton thought he was the smartest man on Magnolia Court. He was wrong. He was the loudest. There's a difference. The smartest man on that street was the one in slippers, the one who said good morning to everyone, the one who fixed your fence and smoked your brisket and never, ever raised his voice. The one who took the photographs. The one who waited. And when it was time, the one who picked up the phone. Direct hit if this story moved you. If you know a Ray Calloway in your life, or if you are one, leave a comment below and tell us about him. Tell us about the quiet ones, the ones who carry a lot and ask for very little. They're out there, on every street, in every cul-de-sac, in every small American town. And the world is a better place because of them. Semper Fi Gunny. You did good. This story is inspired by real events and public court records. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed or dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.